So yeah, this subject was one last year. We put out a email to our to listeners on KWMR on our list. What do you want us to talk about? What would you like to call in about on the air? And one of the subjects that came up more than once is tourism in West Marin. Last year and I don't know, the year before, on long weekends, we saw these huge traffic jams coming out of the park down to Green Bridge and Bear Valley Road, and you know it came as a bit of a shock because most of the time there's plenty of traffic out here at the weekends, but when you're jammed up for miles on Sir Francis Drake. Then you get into this situation where, you know, what if there's an emergency? How do emergency vehicles get through easily? Do you block the road coming the other way? What happened? You know. Anyway, so there's all that. And, of course, this is now a tourist economy out here. It's agriculture, but tourism, I believe, although I haven't been able to find any exact figures on this, I think tourism has taken over from ag out here as a revenue source for West Marin anyway. So we are now a tourist destination part of the county. We contribute more revenue from the transient occupancy tax, which is a 10% charge that people have to pay if they want to stay in a local B&B or a hotel. The unincorporated areas of Marin, which is mostly us and then little bits of Novato and San Rafael, contribute more in TOT, we'll call it, transient occupancy tax, TOT revenues than the rest of the county, anywhere else in the county, even San Rafael, even Sausalito, you know, you'd think, wow, they must be, you know, they have hotels and things. So, yeah, it's an important part of the equation out here, but we're seeing the infrastructure is being overloaded somewhat, so where do we draw the line? So we want to know what you think, where it lands on the scale from blessing to curse. How has it affected you? What are your ideas for making it less disruptive to life out here? Yeah, there you go. 663-8492 or tweet at Let's Talk on KWMR.
Is your blessing versus curse on a curve? Like if blessings were number one and curse were number two, I'd rate it as a 2. I think it's a blessing. I think the only greater blessing would be is if no one had discovered us and we could all just live here quietly separated from the rest of the world.
In an agricultural community, right? In
an agricultural community and ultimately self-sustaining, so it would look totally different. And it wouldn't be tourist economy. It would be us all trying to help each other grow the food and shelter ourselves and be much more locally there. Yeah. But I give it a high rating, so I'm really excited about that idea. So
that's 2 out of 10 with 1 being blessings. 2 out of 10 from Bernie.
Yeah. So hi, caller. What's your name, please?
Oh, hi guys. This is Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
How y'all doing?
Terrific.
Anyway, I'd want to start off by wishing a happy birthday to Neshama Franklin and Nick Whitney. But anyway, yeah, it's rather an impossible situation. And I see it as 2 levels. First of all, there are the people that the park draws. And, of course, all these people that live in these smog-infested areas need a place to come out and breathe fresh air and, stretch out. But there's also the dynamic of people that have rolled their houses over from rentals for locals to B&Bs or, vacation rentals. That's another one, though. I don't think that's a big contributor to the incredible amounts of traffic, but that is a dynamic. The park also I moved here in '73, and I've watched the park probably suck up about 50 houses, because they bought the property, Millerton, Tokoloma, Olema,
Jewel,
Jewel. I mean,
Hamlet.
And it turns out that whoever controls the land determines who's going to be in the community. I mean, if you own a house and you rent it out, then you have some power. If you own a house and you roll it over to a B&B or a vacation rental, you have power. If you're the park and you suck up a bunch of land, no housing is going to go on it, and building a few houses here and there doesn't mean big development. But and I'm not trying to high side, because I've gotten work as a carpenter, converting rentals into B&B, and also right now I'm working for some people that bought a house down the road here in Marshall. They don't live here, but I've gotten a steady paycheck from it, so I'm not trying to be hypocritical about it. But
have you noticed a change over time, Charlie?
A change? Yeah, there's nowhere to park on Main Street anymore.
So every year more tourists come.
Yeah,
it's a force.
I watch the news, the dumb news once in a while at 6:00, and people were making little side comments, because this guy, Bill Martin, who does the weather on Channel 2, is a surfer. Jaime knows him, and he used to come out here and surf. And a couple of the people said, "Oh yeah, West Marin's really what's happening right now." So it's a tough call, because actually when I'm walking around in my community garden, some lady, a couple of times, the ladies from China would come and look and say, "Oh, we have that kind of plant in China, but it's a little different." And it's almost like it's cheaper than a ticket to Beijing. I get to just stand there watering my garden and talk to somebody from China.
To the visitors.
And I also like to be a tourist. I like going somewhere that I probably might have not been before, or that is new and different to me.
Right.
But certainly, something's got to happen with the traffic, as you said. And I wish I had an answer. I mean,
for you, does the blessing outweigh the curse, or is the curse higher on your scale?
Well, I think the curse is higher only because, you see, I refuse to parallel park on Main Street. I'm really in denial in that way. And I see city people bringing their city driving ways to our area, trying to bogart each other for a little parking space. And it's almost as if the tourism, the amount of people that come out here brings its own curse with it, because, they're the ones who, and I don't mean to say we and them, but they're the ones who line the traffic up from the stop sign on Sir Francis Drake and Highway 1 back to White House Pool. I mean, it's almost as if they bring the problem with them.
You mentioned earlier, Charlie, that you did think that it was important that everybody get a chance to come to their national park. And so given that we've got that resource here that I'm drawn to, and I think most of us live here because of the value of having that land protected and being a chance for people to come have access to it. And so I take joy in that people are coming and learning something, getting a chance to get out of the city and have that time here. And I don't know that I think it could be a lot worse. I think indeed we got some problems from the pressures, but I've seen other tourist traps in the world that are much worse.
So that's the question: how much worse can it get before we start to discuss how much infrastructure is going to be needed to cope with it?
And I have to say, in my own conniving mind, having had to accept the volume, I wish I could figure out something to sell them, to tell you the truth.
Well, that's another big factor. The support of the economy for local artisans and merchants is huge.
It supports almost every business in West Marin, right?
I mean, you can't deny that.
And Open Studio Tour is a wonderful thing. I mean, we look forward to having our artists have a chance to meet their clients.
Yeah. And, at the same time, all things factored in, vacation rentals and this, that, and the other thing. I mean, this has been my home since 1973, and, the sands in the hourglass are running down for us here. We got another 20 months here.
You're out.
And it would break my heart to have to leave here because I've felt like my wife and I have contributed mightily to
you're real members of the greater community in West Marin and have been for many years, both you and Sherry. And it's, I think in Marshall you see the effects of tourism and of the weekend visitors mostly, but actually Hog Island all day, every day is full up. Hog Island oysters, every day is full up.
Yeah.
They do a great job of trying to organize parking. They have valets and all that. But ever since they opened their place on the waterfront in San Francisco and the pier there, people want to come to the farm, and it's been a huge boom in business there. And Tamales Bay Oyster Company, although the county and state are trying to basically shut them down, they used to have incredible numbers of people there.
Oh, I know. And
Marshall itself is, as you know, the vacation rental thing in Marshall is turning it into a bit of a ghost town. We have several friends, really nice people who are doing VRBO and Airbnb, and more power to them. It's helping them pay the bills and pay the mortgage on the house, but it's depriving us of community. Happily, most of them who are doing it there, if they're not renting it out to visitors, they are there themselves. So that's nice. But like the guy that you're working for now, the guy that just bought that house, he's not going to be there, right?
Yeah, well, his family shows up once in a while, but not really.
Yeah.
And he's already had the fellow that used to help the previous owner do a vacation rental thing. Right. They're already chatting with each other about doing that. And, in a way, work-wise, it's no skin off my nose because I'll continue to do repairs there and
sure, yeah.
this, that, and the other thing. But, it's a tough call. I get these images. If we were Trumpville, we'd build a big wall around this place. But
the compound.
It's interesting because I was talking to some guy who knew some people that actually knew Woody Guthrie, and it reminded me of how the people from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl used to have to deal with the state police at the California border because they would say, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, you're not going to come in here and take a job away from somebody else.
Charlie, this is Bernie. I can't help but like the idea that if we wanted to, there are just a few roads that at the top of the ridge there coming into West Marin, where if we broke up the highway or whatever, it would change everything. It would actually move us to that realization of living local.
Toll booths. I'm saying toll booths.
Okay, well, I'll get off. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks for calling, Charlie. Bye-bye.
I wish I had a solution, but I can't think of one. Anyway, I'll be listening. Thanks a lot.
Excellent.
Thank you, Charlie.
Bye-bye.
Please call us at 415-663-8492 and share your thoughts on whether the added noise, air pollution, and overpriced housing are just the price we must pay for a booming tourist economy. Yeah. And I would like to comment on that. It's like, it's not just us. This is happening everywhere because, it's a global problem.
Yeah, and it's actually could be taken as a good sign that people are doing staycations, as they're calling them, right? They're coming out of the city and coming up here instead of flying all over the world.
Their footprint's a lot smaller, and I think many people here are Californians, Bay Area people, coming for the weekend and staying a couple nights, and really driving their car is not a big deal. I find that I actually take joy in seeing these zip car rentals, these car sharing services. It tells me that those people are not owning a car, probably in an urban area like San Francisco, and maybe taking public transit or their bike to work, and then on weekends they use this service that they're a share owner of and rent more cheaply, so they don't feel constrained at where can they go, and so they come out here and have their time in nature. And for me, that's joyful.
How much would a shuttle service lessen the impact of traffic, do you think?
Well, if people were indeed willing to get out of their cars and get into a public system, if they were forced into it, they would do it. But I think most people, given the choice, are going to stay with their car. And right now, it's not that bad. I mean, the big choke weekends were Valentine's Day on a long weekend with beautiful weather, and I imagined all of these couples all over our beaches, all over our ridges, and they all enjoyed the sunset together, and then they all got hungry and they all wanted to go to the restaurant. Station House Cafe had to close. I mean, this was a serious situation on those days, but it was for love.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, on Valentine's Day.
But they ran out of food, I understand.
What wasn't it? Labor Day was the same, I think. I was over there doing a play over in the amphitheater at St. Columba's and came out, and there was a line of traffic as far as the eye could see, all the way back into the park.
But we locals
Pretty
can
amazing.
anticipate those weekends and those days, right?
We can now.
Yeah, I mean,
now that it's happened 2 or 3 times. So here's something from Mark, an email that we got. We all, let's see, I have to paraphrase some of this because we all moan about tourism, but we're all tourists at some time in our lives, somewhere else, of course. I remember when the Inverness Ridgies were all complaining about planes carrying tourists overhead into SFO. The loudest of them were people who flew most often into London and other world cities. If you don't like tourism, don't park your butt next to a gigantic tourist magnet like a national park. There are thousands of places not far away with far less tourism.
Was that Mark Dowie?
Yeah.
Boy, I agree.
So,
well.
And then here's a little poem from Vanya Bostrom, who used to live in Marshall, now has lived in Novato for quite a while. And it's actually a poem, an ode to the tourist. Have I thanked you or properly acknowledged the vital role you play in my life? New eyes on old landscape, wondrous to behold. Going 30 with 8 cars behind you, slowing me down, forcing me to slow down, letting me see, if possible, beyond my impatient anger, the newness of it all.
Very nice.
And it goes on. Let us welcome the tourist as we would like to be welcomed, for they come with new eyes, fresh outlook, and remind us of what has been glossed over, rekindle our wonder, lift us out of the habitual, and let us appreciate, if we can, the unique beauty all around us. There you go.
That's very
Well,
nice.
that's beautiful. I mean, don't we all choose to be here, and aren't we all very privileged
Well,
to be here?
I think, I feel absolutely privileged to be here, and I love where I live, although I don't own it. So, it's like teetering on the edge now because properties are so valuable because everyone wants to be here or visit here. So we're all hanging on by our fingernails, all us renters in West Marin, and most, like Charlie. Like you said, he's out in 20 months, and where's he going to go? I know Ingrid Noyes, who was born and raised in Marshall, could not find a place that she could afford to live, so she's now up in Mendocino County. So all that is compounding. That's part of the problem.
The housing problem and what we have to pay for rent anywhere in Marin County is huge.
I'd say the whole Bay Area.
Yeah, I was talking to a woman in Petaluma who was in a place that could have rented for $2,500 a month. She was paying $2,000 a month, and she's saying any increase by the landlord pushes me out. Yeah. But there's nowhere to go.
Right.
You can't live with a family in a suburban kind of home in the Bay Area at what are lower wage workers. And one of the problems with tourism, but this is universal, it's the wealthy people are traveling, or the more well-to-do or middle class. They're the ones traveling, and the people that serve them, the hospitality interest, those are all jobs that are not paid very well. We don't really want to pay them, and these people want a lot of services for relatively cheap. But the truth is they're willing to pay more in the restaurants, they're willing to pay more for their gasoline, they're willing to pay for all these things. So they go home after the weekend's over, and during the week we have to pay those same prices as locals because they've been bid up by the tourists.
Yeah, exactly. What the market will bear, right?
Yeah, but isn't that an inevitable force of our capitalist system? And
absolutely,
yeah.
Laurie emailed me, Laurie Montserrat. She said, and it's in caps with an exclamation point, toilets!
We need them.
More toilets, she cried. Even as a local with access to the hidden toilets in town, we need more toilets. How the heck does Cowgirl get away with serving food and not providing toilets like the other restaurants in town? It's crazy. Hit a nerve? Ha, not at all. Right.
Well, that is indeed a huge problem. And we learned from Amanda talking before the show, right. Who is very knowledgeable in this arena because she and her husband run the Bear Valley Inn, and she's been very active in forming kind of allegiances to see that this tourist tax comes back to support us. And they say they now have the attention of county officials who are going to look at a plan for not just one village, but really for from Muir Beach up north to are there sufficient restroom facilities to accommodate the kind of tourists we're experiencing, and figuring out how that tourist money can be funneled back into building that infrastructure that is indeed at risk. And the businesses are suffering because people have to go somewhere, and so they're going to crash restaurants, et cetera. And many of these restaurants can't handle the volume either with the septic systems in place.
Yeah, exactly. So, so there is a 10% transient occupancy tax, which all vacation rental businesses are supposed to, all short-term rental businesses are supposed to get from the visitor. It's not a tax on the business itself. It's actually paid by the visitor. And there is a 1%, as Amanda was saying, there's a 1% optional optional payment that you can take from the visitor that goes directly to what the county calls a business improvement district, which means that they're actually putting that money back into the Marin Visitors Council, whatever it's called, Visitors Bureau. But the TOT, the occupancy tax, just goes into the general fund of the county. So if it's important that we keep on Steve while he's still sitting there to try to get some of that funding for infrastructure out here, like for instance.
And are there B&Bs out here not collecting that tax from their tenants?
So AirBnB and VRBO, these are vacation rental by owner. Those people are probably not paying any tax at all.
How could we encourage them to see the benefit?
Well, we could enforce it. They're supposed to be paying tax.
Who is not enforcing it?
The county, because they don't have the manpower to go out and check. I mean, you could actually just check online, see who's on VRBO and Airbnb in West Marin, and just send them a letter. And they may send them letters, but there's no enforcement of it.
So the benefit I see for them...
Or penalty, and there's no penalty for not paying?
I don't think there's a penalty, no.
No, I bet once they get busted, there'll be fines and stuff. But I think that there could also be the power of persuasion, because I think if you're benefiting by having these vacationers rent your home, and you're getting a premium for that, so you're earning extra income, you are part of that tourist trade. And so you are inviting people out here to use public services. And if you're not helping them make the payment, because you don't have to have it come out of your pocket, you can indeed properly add that to the fee. And I think if people saw themselves in that tourist business and supporting the idea of that the business gets enough infrastructure, you can't think that these people are only coming to your place. They're coming to use the community restaurants that we all benefit from. They're coming to use the park. See the beauty of the area? Yeah, and so they're buying at shops that we all benefit from.
Yeah, it's a business, and like all businesses, they have to pay their fair share.
Yes.
And they're not.
No,
well, maybe some are. Maybe some are.
We don't know. I called the county tax office and talked to a guy about this, and he said, "No, we don't. We're not looking for them. It's basically an optional thing. I mean, they should, because they're running a business." They should have a business license for their vacation
They don't have
rentals.
A business license? Is that right?
Well, no, some do. Some do. I mean, I know a B&B here in Vintners Park that is fully on board with having the license, with paying
B&B is different from a VRBO.
Okay, all right. But I mean...
It's like a lodging house.
Okay, I understand. The idea of rentals now is relatively newer than the B&B. And so maybe it just takes some public awareness to help this, because we all know people that are renting out, and we might just inquire if they're helping to contribute to this tax, because that's political power out here, and properly used with our county supervisor, and we've got an election coming up. We could even make sure that candidates address that issue.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We did get an email from Anonymous. Just because we live here doesn't mean we own the area. It frustrates me when the same people who claim to be open to others, for example, surrounding immigration issues, are so hung up on tourists. We're all just people. If we have an our town is so special mentality, which I think we do, it seems silly to be mad when others recognize that specialness too. That said, new development is a whole different issue which I think should be treated carefully, as are VRBOs and summer homes. As for tourists enjoying a pastry downtown, let's not get our panties in a twist. Thank you, Anonymous, whoever you are. And somebody else, let's see, Melinda says, the great and increasing numbers of tourists out here affect the natural world, in addition to irritating residents who can't find parking or get around as speedily as we'd like to. I fear the quality of life for deer, birds, fish, and bobcats is rendered less than ideal by such a burden, specifically air quality, noise, and commotion. It ain't peaceful. Well, that is certainly true. The more cars, the more noise, the more pollution, the more, and I live right on Highway 1, so I get the full force of the Sunday drives and the Sunday rides and all the other stuff. But that's been going on for a long time. But it is certainly a huge increase in traffic every day out there.
Yeah, and we can expect that pressure to continue. But there are a lot of forces, and maybe after the break we can talk a little bit about some of the successful political forces out here that have curtailed development, that have curtailed this buildup of infrastructure, and indeed push back on this inevitable growth of tourists wanting to come here.
Yes, we've a lot of people worked very hard back in the 60s and 70s and 80s to keep open space here, to create the National Seashore, to make this place as beautiful as it is, and to prevent a freeway spur coming out here and the development that was already being drawn up and planned for with marinas and hotels and
Targets.
Oh my God, it would have been a very different place. But thanks to the very hard work of a lot of people, they created this magnet for people from the city and from all around the world, really. They come here. So, what have we done? We've created either a monster or we've created exactly what we wanted to create. What do you think?
Find out what our caller thinks. Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
I'm Swervin Curvin.
Hey, Brian.
Swervin.
And I'm a transplant myself, so I can't really come up against any real complaint of tourists. And I just had a poem to offer, as you brought up a poem earlier. I call it Tourists. The swinging wide of the automatic palace market door sends sipping birds rising from the gutters to the giant Monterey pine. At first, I think streetwise blackbirds, sidewalk opportunists of Main Street, but the banded tail tip dipped in yellow paint, like the gum-wrapped bicyclist garbs, bordered by gray slate, and the bandit's black mask come to steal away our town, give these stray flocks of cedar waxwings away. They whiz across the street in symphony to frolic in the privet branches like miniature acrobats, upside down, drunk on berries, like the hyper-caffeinated cyclist chatter in front of the bakery. Watching from the commons, I get a few out-of-towners to take notice. One woman tells me she remembers them from back east, the direction in which all will return after this seasonal sojourn. I'd wanted to tell them all, good riddance. Now I can say, good day. That's it.
That's great, Brian.
Nice, really nice.
I think it's like anywhere, in any situation, if you can avoid stereotyping and get to the point of connecting, the ideal place, I think. But I can certainly be guilty of a lot of irritants and internal chatter against the influx. But I think it's important also to keep the heart open.
Sure.
Every individual that you come across.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you very much, Brian. That's great.
It made me think about what I feel is a vibrancy that the tourism brings. That without it, we'd be a smaller community and we'd figure out different ways to exist and stuff. But there's something about that energy coming in.
Well, a lot of businesses wouldn't be able to make it either.
Yeah, and then just see the families that are out on an outing on one of our trails or walking through town, I don't know, and sitting in the restaurant. There's just a joy. I mean, you can people watch, as was done in this poem, to your heart's content, either in the town or out in nature on a trail, on a beach. These tourists bring a lot of energy.
And they bring a lot of joy. I mean, they're usually having a very good time, and God knows we need that right now.
Like every day's a wedding.
Well, I agree with that, and I also wonder if it's my stereotyping, but some of the folks, I'm guessing, don't really care about interacting with local humans, or the natural world is just something I'm maybe protecting, but...
Yeah, that's interesting. Is it just a place to go for a Sunday drive, right? You just go out, you shop at you go and get a cup of coffee and you drive back home.
A lot of tourists, I feel,
interact with.
Right. That used to be one of my favorite things, was to go to Marshall's store and just sit down at those outside tables there and have a sandwich and then just talk to the people across the table. And they're from all over the world. You get to talk to these incredible, very diverse people.
Right.
Most of them don't even know where they are.
And if you open up and show a willingness to engage with them, they're happy to talk. They feel like they're getting a little bit of this culture to take back with them by talking to people.
Yeah. Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah. Excellent what you brought to the show.
Okay. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so that's all part of it too. Yeah, we tend to, as he was saying, we tend to stereotype the visitors and the bikers and everybody else that comes here. And how much actual interaction is there between locals, between residents and visitors?
Well, there's the interaction between the sheriff's department and the motorcycles, right?
Well, someone, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
There go the donors.
I think it's also interesting to note how different communities have taken different approaches. Like the community of Bolinas didn't want as many tourists in their town, so they took down the directional signs the county kept putting up. So there's a clever strategy on how to frustrate the tourists.
Finally gave up on putting it back up, too. The only, one of the frustrations for me living in Marshall is living on the windy parts of Highway 1 is that there are not enough turnouts. And when there are turnouts, most visitors don't even see them, and they don't even see that there's anyone following them, even though if there are, 5 people following a car, they're required by law to pull over. So there's no signage to that effect. There's very rarely that, in fact, I can't think of a place between Marshall or Tamales to Point Reyes where it actually says slower traffic, please use turnouts.
But even where it says that, most of the time, people don't pull out. They won't use them,
because they're just going, you. And,
what about that lady, our caller, who said that maybe it should teach us to enjoy the world at 30 miles an hour instead of 45?
Right, yeah, Vanya, who wrote the other poem, yeah. There is that, and I understand exactly. I don't mind that they're driving slowly, but boy, when you're doing 25 in a 55 mile zone, you just kind of you kind of wish that they were paying a little more attention and had a little more thought about the people who might be in more of a hurry than they are. I do get why they're doing that. I've done that in many other places in the world, and I drive a VW Vanagon, so it's not the fastest thing on the road. But I always pull out. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm a slow vehicle. I pull over all the time. So, but on that stretch between here and Marshall, between Point Reyes and Marshall, there's going north. There's hardly any pullouts. It's just a couple of driveways.
No, there's
really,
not many.
That gets kind of frustrating.
And that's something that could be remedied.
That could be remedied. And in fact, I'm seeing some survey markers on a couple of places where they're sort of unofficial turnouts. So maybe they're going to, maybe the county or maybe it's Caltrans is going to put going to put some extra turnouts in, which would be wonderful.
Novato Boulevard has a fair amount. I drive all these streets. Sir Francis Drake used to have more turnouts, so they put all these berms in to prevent parking. And even the unofficial ones, I think should be used. There's plenty of those if we know the road. And I'm like you, but I don't have as many people come up behind me as I come up behind. So
yeah, exactly. What was I going to say? Anyway, no, I lost my train of thought there. I had a great point to make.
Well, if I may go back to, we were talking about pressures against development and infrastructure and ultimately tourism. Village associations like the San Geronimo Valley Planning Group was incredible at coming up with the plan for the 4 villages that said development will focus around villages and then having open public space surrounding, and then the Point Reyes Village Association, the Inverness Association. I'm sure there's others. I know in Bolinas and Stinson they do it as well. I'm just not as familiar with those groups. But they are a key to helping slow the pressures.
Yeah, and I would like to acknowledge one of the people who really did amazing work in the valley in was Jean Berensmeyer. She just was practically the warrior princess for just phenomenal protection going through.
Yeah, no question. And really, it was a group of people who had shared her vision. She took leadership, and I want to just say that I appreciate all of the leadership that was shown out in West Marin in the many ways that you talked about. So we are the privileged ancestors who no, we're not ancestors. It's the other way around. Successors. Descendants of people who created this and kept this place from turning into a daily city or something.
Yeah, well, a lot of people like Charlie moved here back in the 70s, and it was when nobody wanted to come out here, and nobody wanted to live here other than the ranchers. And
that's when rents were low because it was considered far away from everything until it was fully discovered.
Why would anyone want to drive all the way out there?
Yeah. But, the rents throughout all of Marin, the Bay Area, as we've talked about, are incredibly hard. So this idea that people have to leave, yes, it's unfortunately been happening. I've had friends who had to leave. We may have to leave. Others are going to be under pressure. And it's really, within our capitalist system, there's really no way to avoid that. If people value the property here and even a night's stay here more for more money than somewhere else, then that bids up the price. And that's what's been happening.
So there's strain on infrastructure. So keeping pressure or starting to put more pressure maybe on the county, on Steve Kinsey and the supervisors to dedicate more of the transient tax that is paid mostly by West Marin for the county to put it into new infrastructure. The sewage system for Point Reyes Station, wow, too bad. Back in the 70s, the Coast Guard offered to put in a sewage system for the entire town because of their housing at the end of town there. Yeah. And it was turned down because they thought it would promote growth. It seems like if you had a certain size of sewage plant that could only service so many people, then that would limit the size of the growth itself, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but part of it is making sure that indeed gets allocated to those public services where the tourists use, and not just allow for more homes to be built.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So we do have another caller. Hi, caller. What's your name, please?
It's Amanda. I actually had an opportunity to call in.
Oh, great. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
I'm listening to the show. I've had to go in and out a little bit, but I just want to remind folks that, you're talking about Steve Kinsey, who's going to be at the end of his term at the end of this year, and there's a big, hearty group of candidates who are going to run for that seat for District 4. And I want to let folks know that there's going to be a candidates forum, which is being organized by a bunch of different groups with the Village Association taking up the lead, and there will be information out shortly on how the questions can be put towards these candidates. And I think this issue of managing visitors is an important topic for whoever goes into the District 4 seat going forward. Because I know there's models of other places where they've done management plans and looked at all of these impacts, like, from infrastructure to traffic to revenue and all of these things, because it's a complicated web that's woven in this community with the locals and the businesses and the visitors. But I think it's really important that we think about what questions we want to ask the candidates and find out what they think and how they would behave as a representative of our district.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Are you aware of a model that you particularly think works well?
No, I think there's issues. There's a lot of free parking out here, and as we know from these past 2 years, that some of the, ample parking areas at Marin is getting a huge amount of impact through, and those people are all going right through the community of Bolinas to get there. The visitor center here at the Bear Valley Trailhead has overflowed a few times, and people have had to park down Bear Valley Road. We all saw the traffic on Valentine's Day that was backed up to Mount Vision Road all the way to Fairfax on St. Francis Drake Boulevard.
Wow.
There's definitely, it's a destination. It's a beautiful place to come, especially on a beautiful day. And we did a really long hike that day, and we even saw a lot of people 7-8 miles out in the middle of nowhere. There were people deeply into the park that weekend. There were so many people here. So, how can those things be offset? One, I was talking to somebody, and they said, well, how often do you pay to go to the state parks, to drive in the park?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to go someplace where it's free to park. Are there ways to manage some of that? Because they've had to pay to have rangers on horseback and in vehicles just turning people away from Marin. You can't come here today if there's too many people. We've had guests that stayed at our inn come back and say, yeah, we're going to get up really early tomorrow morning and go because we couldn't even go in and park on the road.
Wow.
So it's a pretty complicated situation, and we are sitting right on the rim of a huge area of densely populated. The Marin County Bay Area is a big place, and then you have all of these people coming in to visit San Francisco, and they're coming out to Muir Woods, and they're impacting Muir Beach, and we see it up here as well, and it's starting to impact up in Sonoma County as well, because there just are so many people, not only in the Bay Area but just in the world. And it's something that we're going to have to face, I think, in general, that the population is not necessarily going down.
Amanda, as we facilitate and build up the infrastructure that the traveling public needs and needs to use, does that encourage even more? In other words, are we on a path that if we restrict and somehow force it not to be the perfect experience? Yeah.
I don't know. I think these are all really good questions, and I think there are a lot of really good heads in this community and a lot of good thinkers, and I think it just really needs to have a way that's facilitated to have some conversations that include the park, that include the visitor serving businesses, that include the Marin County Department of Public Works. There's a lot of implications around this.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you,
I think really important to make sure that we question those
candidates.
Yes.
Because that's going to be our representative, and that's, those are the people who we're going to be working with. That's going to be our representative on the Board of Supervisors. But it's also really important to think about who else is running for the Board of Supervisors in the other districts that are gateway areas to our community.
Right. Yep.
So get politically involved, and as a caller, I can say this. Please register to vote and vote in this next election.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye-bye.
We have a tweet from Murray. Thank you, Murray. One way to keep the communities whole is to build affordable housing, plus legally limit the amount of vacation rentals. So yes, that will take a long time to happen and take a long time to go through.
San Francisco is limiting or trying to say that a private residence put on these Airbnb type rentals that can't be 365 days a year.
Right.
that it needs to be 40% or whatever it is managed so that it doesn't turn into a hotel without really properly being a hotel.
Right. And I think I read this week that Airbnb, feeling the pressure from San Francisco, is actually paying the tax, the transient occupancy tax for
Is that right?
for Airbnbs.
So we need to keep the pressure on here that everyone pay it. And I think you mentioned that B&Bs, bread and breakfasts, they pay it. Well, yeah, the good ones do, but I think there's ones that don't. So I think we really...
Yeah, well, if they've got a shingle hanging outside, they're probably paying the tax. If they don't, then probably not.
Well, I think it wouldn't hurt to ask. We might form a little bit of pressure to help alleviate that and just legitimize it. There's nothing wrong with doing it.
It doesn't cost them anything. It's paperwork. It's more paperwork, right?
Yeah.
They have to send them in every month. I think the taxes in a form every month, but. You know, if you buy a house here, you're paying all kinds of taxes anyway. Why not just add this to the load and feel fortunate that you have an income-producing property here that is not necessarily a home, and you know, pay into the fund, especially if we get them to agree to dedicate at least a big portion of that 10% to infrastructure improvement so that we can handle more visitors if more are going to come. A good earthquake, of course, would put paid to all that. But
Well, Murray mentioned that we should allow the building of more low-income housing.
Yeah.
That's a real problem throughout the state. It's acute out here, and one of the limitations has been the fact that we don't have sewer services to add that many more bathrooms, and so that's been a limiting factor. And so, what is affordable anyway? I mean, is it even possible to be affordable here, other than through subsidies? You know, and CLAM has been a program to manage adding to that inventory, which is limited. The Coast Guard facility is something that CLAM is working with the county and others to create that. But will it ultimately bring down the market rent for everybody? I don't think so. I think
no, but it will allow people who serve this community to live in this community instead of commuting from Santa Rosa. You know?
That's a good point.
If they want to bring their kids out here and, you know, whatever.
I get it.
But there will be lots of demand for that housing, and it won't solve the problem.
No, but it's certainly a step in the right direction in terms of ethics.
Mm-hmm. And the sewer system's going to have to be solved there, too. I mean, they were holding it for
Well, let's talk ethics for a
30
moment.
years.
Is it right that these businesses that have the tourists in, who can charge them a premium and are still wanting to pay their workers such that they can't afford the market rates to live here? What about that ethic? I agree that it's unethical for us as a society really to require that people live in Vallejo, where you can still rent for $1,000 a month, and then drive all the way here on the cheap gas that currently exists, and work at minimum wage here, and then have to drive back after a long day, and not let those people earn enough to be able to live here. That would change everything, but it would really make prices on things doubled. Now, on gasoline, we get away with really high prices compared to over the hill because it's a monopoly out here. And if you need gas, you need gas. And it seems like we pay a premium on food. We pay a premium in restaurants for sure. Locals pay a big premium, but maybe it still isn't high enough. But that is a problem for locals if it goes too high.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
we do have some businesses, unfortunately, that have a locals night or give the senior discount. I wish there were more locals discounts. Ray's Cafe has one. You can go in there and tell them you're local. You get 10% off.
Right.
I'd like to see a lot more of that because you really can't charge the tourists more. You really have to figure out how to charge the visitors, the locals, less.
Yeah, right.
And we got a caller. What's your name, please?
My name is Vicky, and I'm calling from Marshall.
Hi, Vicky.
How are you doing today?
We're
Very
great.
well.
Good. I just had an observation about the whole concept of bed and breakfast. When it started in England, bed and breakfasts were literally people who had a spare room, and they let you stay in their house, and they fed you breakfast, and you were off, you know. Mm-hmm. We seem to have taken that term, and any small hotel is now called a bed and breakfast. But they still should be subject to the hotel taxes that you've been talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also, it has something to do with the vacation rentals, too. And I think that your point was very well made, that, it's all very well to rent out a spare room on an ad hoc basis. But when you rent out the whole house and you take it off the market for local people, shall we say, then it just does change the paradigm, and I think you should be subject to more taxes if you're making money on it. Then you should be subject to the same taxes as a hotel.
Well, that's the great thing about the transient occupancy tax, is that it's not a taxation of the business. They're not paying more taxes. The visitor is paying the tax.
The visitor is paying the tax. But I think that there is an argument to be made that the person who's making the money on the tax should also pay.
Well, yeah. I mean, are they declaring this income? Well, that's a whole other...
it's a whole other kettle of fish.
Vicki, thank you so much for calling in today again.
It's always a wonderful subject. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was fun. So I want to thank all our listeners and callers today for listening and calling. Hope you tune in every Thursday at 11, because your voice really does matter.